Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And welcome, everyone. Yes, the last panel of the day, but we are closing with big names and a beautiful conversation that we're going to have. I'm so proud and honored to be here today to be able to share with you our stories and the stories of five phenomenal, well, I'm including myself, but four phenomenal women and myself, which I want to consider phenomenal as well. And without further ado, I want to jump directly into the conversation because I do have a lot to cover. So, as I do want to say, I have two phenomenal women here, and we have two on live stream who are one in Portugal and the other one here in the state of Texas. So I'm going to ask you guys, thank you so much for being here today, to introduce yourselves as you answer my first question. This is very, very important. So the first person I'm going to introduce is Muna Hussaini, Head of Governance for ESG at Indeed.com. And Muna, please introduce yourself. As you introduce yourself, please tell me, what does being phenomenal mean to you?
Well, hello, nice to meet you all, whether you're here in the room or joining us virtually. To answer the question about what it means to be a phenomenal woman, I actually have to appreciate what the act before us said. Saul Paul was talking about what it means to manifest the exceptional human being that you are, and I was thinking about this answer before, and I want to say it's living life on your terms. When you were born, you were already whole and complete, and as you grew up, the world put expectations on you of what you should be, what you should look like, how you should act, and you start to make yourself smaller over time. And to be phenomenal is to show up as you are with all of the brilliance and walk through life in the way that you are uniquely positioned to do.
That is beautiful. It's basically talking about authenticity, correct? I love that. The next person, Mercedes Ballard. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
It's Ballard, but...
Ballard. Okay, Mercedes Ballard, she's founder and talent advisor at heuristic.co, as well as a phenomenal woman. And please, same question as you introduce yourself.
Hi, so I'm Mercedes Ballard, as she said, co-founder and talent advisor at Heuristic. We have a talent management consultancy that helps growth stage startups build out their talent strategies in an inclusive and equitable way. And for me, a phenomenal woman, and Muna, you said this so eloquently, but I really think it's living unapologetically your authentic self. When you can show up and then bring other people into the room to show up, that is what it means to be phenomenal, in my opinion.
That is a great response. I love it. And the next person would be Melinda Garvey. Melinda, can you hear us well?
I can.
Awesome. Welcome. So good to see you. So Melinda is the CEO and founder at On the Dot and also founder of the Austin Women magazine. Same question, Melinda. What does it mean to be phenomenal to you?
Yes, hi everyone. I'm so glad that I'm joining you. I'm actually, I'm getting a lot of feedback here, but I'm on the coast of Texas for spring break with my kiddo and family, and I'm just really happy to be joining you here today. I think that for me, being a phenomenal woman has always been about bringing women together to help each other, to build networks, to share our networks with each other, to build diverse networks and make sure that we're always reaching out, being that role model for someone else and seeking out role models for yourself. It's really about all of us coming together to really create this amazing power.
That's great, Melinda. I'm sorry for the feedback. I know you're getting that. I don't know if it's my mic or something. And please, last but not least, Taisha Dotson. She's Director of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion at Austin Women in Tech. Same question, Tai. Could you please tell us what does being phenomenal mean to you?
Yes, absolutely. I'm also really just happy to be here. Love to be up on this panel with so many other incredible women. I think being a phenomenal woman, in addition to the things that everyone else has said, is also just having that continued growth mindset, right? Growing in who you are as you are living in authentically and evolving, through life. One of the beautiful things that we do, and I think have always done as women, is continue to learn and grow and adjust as we see things need to change. And I think that also is a key factor in being a phenomenal woman.
I love that. And well, myself, I'm Paty Sesma, and I was already presented as Vice President of Marketing and Communications at AUTMHQ. That makes me really proud to be here representing this organization. But I wanted to add myself to this panel because, again, we all have stories to share, and I think that for me, considering myself phenomenal means being able to, as a woman, overcome a lot of natural challenges that come to life for being a woman. So when you're able and proud of yourself of being able to, I'm sorry for being redundant, when you're able to overcome challenges and look at yourself and see growth, that's what makes at least me feel so phenomenal and so good about everything I do, not only professionally, but also personally in so many ways. And that basically is my answer. I want to ask you guys, I'm going to start with Taisha. Tai, on a scale from 1 to 5, we're going to jump a little bit more into the professional category. So, Taisha, on a scale of 1 to 5 stars, with 5 being easy and 1 being difficult, how would you rank your career as a woman in technology?
I definitely would say maybe 2 or 3, somewhere in there. I personally feel that I've probably struggled more moving up and figuring out how to get to where I want to be, seemingly, than some other folks that maybe I've worked with in the past, certainly. And I don't know if that's just something I projected or if it's true, but I've definitely had a tough time navigating my way through the industry.
Same here. I'm going to go with Melinda. Melinda, same question.
Oh gosh, I think that I'm probably more like a 4 or 5. I think it's been really difficult for me as a non-technical founder of a SaaS company, which is my newer startup on the dot. And I think a lot of it though has to do with what's in my own head, just my own fear of technology, not ever having been in it, and it sort of felt like this big bad world out there that I didn't deserve to be in somehow. So I'm not sure, and I think that as I've gotten into it, what I realize is that building the same kind of networks I've built as I've gone on the rest of my career, but building those with women in tech, I think is going to be really, really important to me, and I've been starting to do that. And I notice the minute I start building those networks, things start to get easier. And I think that just shows the power of women coming together and supporting each other, and that is no different in tech.
I love that. And we can wait for you to tell us more about your story, Melinda. I really want you to share that because you have shared some with me and it's so interesting. Mercedes, how about you?
So if 1 is difficult and 5 is easy, I would give myself probably about a 4. And I think that this question's a little tricky because it's extremely subjective, but when I think of my career in tech, it's non-traditional. I have no idea how I ended up where I am. It's just a series of choices, but I grew up with my father, who is an engineer, and throughout lives, the people who have been the most amount of influence and the people that I've looked up to have had careers in tech. And so the idea of being in the industry hadn't ever been so far-fetched. I just never wanted to be an engineer myself because I'm a super people person and I like to talk to strangers rather than sit behind a computer. But over the course of my career and my journey through tech, I think it's only gotten easier, and it's only gotten easier because of the people that I surround myself by. You'll hear me say this over and over the course of this panel, and then in general if you talk to me. The power of your network and of community is what can set you up for success and can help you build bridges to almost anything that you might want to accomplish in life. And so yeah, for me, I would say a 4, given the context of my upbringing and who I am and my personality.
That is so funny because I would say that my story is similar to yours so much. Yeah. How about you, Muna?
Well, I guess I've been working for over 20 years, and it hasn't been a straight line. There have been times where it's been easier than others and harder. If I think about when I first started working, I'm the child of Indian immigrants. My father's also a petroleum engineer, and my mother, I like to call her a domestic engineer.
That's awesome. I love that.
And being Indian, a lot of our family friends were doctors or engineers, no surprise to anybody who might be listening. But I really had to figure things out on my own. I really felt like I had been dropped in the ocean, and I had to swim and navigate on my own. And over time, you start to find your tribe and people who can help you. And as I started to move up in my career, I think at first it was difficult because I didn't know what I was doing. And when you're, in school, it's one set of criteria to be successful. And then you turn a corner and you go to work in the corporate environment, and what made you successful at school has nothing to do with what makes you successful at work. So I had to figure that out on my own, and then you start to deal with external conflict, which is very different. And again, being raised the way I was as a traditional Indian girl who's also Muslim, had different cultural expectations, and then had to navigate that. And then I think as I've moved up in my career, the conflict actually is more internal than external, because it's like, how am I shedding preconceived notions or cultural things or boxes I put myself in so that I can then move forward? And so I think it's been easy and hard on different aspects, but I couldn't give you a star for the 20 plus years.
Yes, I understand that. And for me to answer that question, I would say, in all humbleness, a 5. I feel like it has to do a lot. You mentioned how your environment helps so much. Mm-hmm. My father is also an engineer, and one of the things that I most admire about him, I kind of share a little bit about my family with you too, Muna, one time, about how we are so traditional as well. But my dad was very adamant about having us, my siblings and myself, getting a good education. He had always expectations for us, but not for him to feel fulfilled, but for us to be happy. Yeah. So the fact that he was working at, I wanted to be a TV host, just so you know, guys. So the fact that he was already working on television, it was very easy for me, and I knew I can achieve anything. So it was always very easy. I was always very a go-getter. I was yes, I know I'm gonna be able to become a TV host. And I got there and I'm yeah, I really don't like it. I'm gonna do this then. And I was changing all the time. And suddenly, I don't know why, but I hold a bachelor's degree in communications, but eventually communications shifted into more social channels, digital channels. And I think that my shift into technology was so smooth, coming from a place where I was already knowing that everything was achievable. So to me, I want to say it's a 5, because I wanted to continue to it like that. Yeah. Okay, next question. Do you believe that women pursuing careers in tech face intimidation from their male peers? This is a hard question, and I really don't want to talk a lot about negative things, but it's a reality. A lot of women face challenges in the tech industry and in any other industries, but we are focusing on in tech. And I do want to address this topic, but of course I'm also going to address talking about accomplishments and doing great things in tech. But have you, any of you, do you think that is something that is actually happening right now, Mercedes?
Yeah, so I'm just thinking about being a woman in the workforce now, and especially in COVID. I think we'll probably talk on this throughout the course of the panel, but even now with household duties falling onto women and trying to have a career and balance those and expectations, it's always a little bit more challenging, just given the natural roles that we've fallen into the in the household. Other issues that are especially prevalent in tech is the stigma that STEM is a masculine career path. And so if we're talking from education, that's the first hurdle that we have to go over. Mm-hmm. If you look at the statistics, you see that women in STEM related programming, girls in STEM related programming, it drops off substantially from elementary school to middle school, and again from middle school to high school. And so that's generally a barrier. But it is a difficult space for women to occupy, and I think that over time, as we continue to take the space that we deserve and want in these spaces, it'll become a little bit more equitable But right now, I would say, yeah, it's probably about a 50-50 in terms of who gets like an easy path and who's going to be, more intimidated by their male counterparts or a manager or boss or so on and so forth.
I agree with you. I would say that I do think that it's something that is very visible, unfortunately, in certain environments, not everywhere, but like I said, we're talking about in tech, specifically in tech, but I do think that there are corporations who have groups and a culture that actually promotes to be respectful towards one another and have inclusion and in equity and diversity and all that. But there is a lot that, I come from a place where I used to work at a company where they really didn't really had those types of conversations. So, Muna, what do you think about that? I mean, and I'm really, really interested in knowing what you think about it based on your experience.
I think it depends on where you work at, because, if I had to just generalize, sometimes like startups can really be entrenched with like bro culture, locker room culture, and I've been lucky enough not to work at places like that, but I do have friends who have worked in places where, to be explicit, you've heard stories about, you've gone to conferences and people were talking about apps or instances where it's about like women's anatomy. Yeah. And having to work in an environment where you're objectified is very difficult. But I've never dealt with those things. I've seen more of the microaggressions of being interrupted constantly, or not having an opportunity to share an idea, or you can say something and a coworker says something and then it's their idea, yes. Right? And there's the whole double bind of you can be strong, but don't be too strong, because then you're the B word, and then so those are all difficult things. But I mean, as much as those things happen, I've been really lucky to have a lot of male colleagues who are not only great allies but sponsors, and so I would just say that when you're interviewing at a place, you get to interview them also. They're not just interviewing you, and hopefully, especially in this market, you can pick where you work.
I totally agree. Ty, can you answer this question as well? I'm going to repeat the question just to make sure that we have people, if there's people who's joining just right now. So, do you believe, Ty, that that women pursuing careers in tech face intimidation from their male peers?
I think I echo what others have said. I definitely know that it's something that exists. I don't know, to what percentage it would be, actually having, or if it's even just perceived, right? Because I know when I first graduated, I had a degree in web development, and when I did one of my first interviews, I know I blew that interview, but I was nervous, and I was the only woman and I need to add layering to that. I was a Black woman sitting in a panel interview with 4 white dudes, and I was intimidated. And I don't know that that's something that they were doing or if it was just in my head, but I got good grades in my program. I knew what I was talking about and completely blew that interview, right? So I think it exists. I think in this market, people have the opportunity to not walk into that kind of an environment. But I think you also have to pay attention to, am I feeling, some kind of way being in this room, and then reminding yourself that you deserve to be there.
I understand. Melinda, do you have an answer for us for the same question?
Yeah, and I think I have a little bit different perspective because I'm in the startup world. And I think what Muna referred to is definitely true. And I've had my own company, but for example, recently I went to a SaaS conference, and literally I was one of 3 women in a room of 200 plus. And it was basically all white guys. They were all 30 or under, most. So, not only am I older, but I'm a woman. And I don't think that it wasn't like there was aggression, but there was definitely, like, no one was reaching out to talk to me and trying to include me. There wasn't that sense of, hey, wow, I recognize that that's a woman over there. She's a woman in SaaS. That's super unique. I want to go find out about her. I'm interested in her. How could I bring her into the fold? How could I support her and help her? It was just like, anyway, it was just very, very interesting. And I think that really translates through, we're launching into another fundraising, event. And, it's all white men for the most part. And it's really, really, and it's all men who have been in tech or been in, this world for a long time. So it's definitely intimidating. And I don't think that there is this sense of aggression per se, but there's not any desire to be inclusive. And I'll give you one more example. I'm on a group of tech founders that they're actually SaaS tech founders. And a woman posted, this was just happened yesterday, saying, hey, I know there's not many women in SaaS, and I'd love to know what other women are here. I'd love to kind of form a group because I don't have any other women. They're really hard to find. Well, the first person who weighs in was a man who basically was like, this is discriminatory. Why would you want to form a group of just women? And then a whole thing ensued. It's like they just don't get it, because it's just such a different world. So I just think that there are a lot of things like that it just makes it very difficult to navigate. It makes it more difficult to succeed because you don't have people that are actively in there supporting you. It makes it more difficult to raise money. So I just think there is a lot of that out there, and it's. I just wish there was sort of this wake up, like, oh wow, we could really make a difference for women and really help bring them in. But I'm just not sure that that's happening in all cases. Not, that's a generalization, of course, but.
No, I love it. And actually, it happened to me in the same exact way. I used to share I was in part of a team of very diverse team. It was like guys and it was 2 girls and 3 guys, and we were like from I think Dominican Republic. I said it in Spanish. Dominican Republic, and then my friend was from India as well, and we had, I can't remember, but there was like people from everywhere. It was like a cool team. But I was always a different person because I was a woman in tech who was not a millennial, and I could feel that all the time. Literally, guys, they were talking all the time in acronyms, and I was like, at some point, I just stopped asking. I was like, I don't get it. Because of my culture, I'm very used to having the type of women's first, and I opened the door of the car for you, and I opened the door for you, and that wasn't happening there. It was like if we had an outing and we were going to a restaurant. It was so funny because I was walking, and they were like, boom, and go into the restaurant. And I was like, that was awkward. Okay, but it's internal, like you said initially. But yes, that happened to me, and I realized that being a woman in tech, a Hispanic woman in tech who's not a millennial, was a lot to carry on my shoulders to be able to succeed, just like you said, Melinda. This is a question for you, Mercedes. You have talked about non-traditional roles, and I want you to tell me a little bit more about that.
So I think what I mean when I say non-traditional roles in technology is just the career paths that you can take that isn't solely programming or designing apps or doing UX UI, things that require like a CS or a math degree or things of that sort. So when I talk about non-traditional roles, ways that you can get into technology that don't necessarily require those particular requirements are going to be things like, product managers or project managers. Those are people who need to be able to translate the technical requirements of the engineers into a language that, marketers and sales folks and general population can understand. There are other roles with regard to like design that is more conceptual. So actually having an art degree, is beneficial for those particular user interfaces. And then also there's, and I guess this is maybe a little bit still in the STEM realm, but we were talking earlier about the gamification. And gamification, yes, it is like, programming and things of that sort, but that is mostly human behavior that you're looking into. And so like people with a psychology degree are way qualified for looking at, those types of technologies and whatnot. And so that's what I'm talking about when I refer to non-traditional roles in technology.
It's super interesting. Yeah. So there's a lot of those like in this new world. And do you think the pandemic has contributed to a lot of non-traditional roles?
I don't know if the pandemic has necessarily contributed to it. I think that what we're seeing right now is a huge migration of talent from particular industries into tech. Something that's super relevant and top of mind right now for me is I'm working with a colleague that is working on upskilling and reskilling nurses, like registered nurses, into the tech space. Because if you think of like the transferable skills, like these mostly women are highly qualified to work in, high stress environments. They're very detailed oriented. Mm-hmm. They have to be able to simplify very complex, medical issues or medicines and whatnot, and translate that into layman's term for their patients. They have great people skills, so on and so forth. And so I think what the pandemic has done is like people who are outside of tech, it's given them an avenue to pursue tech, and also people see that like tech culture, like with regards to company culture, like people care, and it's really an employee market right now. And so it's given people a little bit more agency in terms of like how they steer their career.
So Muna, on that same topic, so when a person who is a non-tech savvy person or just not into technology, but they want to transition into technology, like where do you say they should start?
Well, I'm going to take an opportunity, Paty. I'm going to pass it back to you because we're here on this panel for Autumn, right? Austin Urban Technology Movement, and this is a great organization that does exactly what you're talking about. And so for folks who are listening, can you tell them a little bit about Autumn's offerings?
I will, absolutely, but okay, and then I'll get it back to you because I want to tell you, like, what would your advice be to them? So Austin Urban Technology Movement, also known as AUTMHQ, is a nonprofit organization that it's focused 100% on bridging the gap between the Black and Hispanic communities and the tech industry. We provide all the resources that the people in these communities may need to be able to get certificates and get skills and get just ready to enter the tech industry and thrive in it. And we do that, of course, as a nonprofit organization through your funding. So donation is very important, and I really hope that you actually are able to donate to us through this event as well. But we do that for making sure that people are always kind of like changing their life, getting better jobs, and at the end becoming self-sustained. So for us, it's a process where we invite people, like if they have that wish to become a person working in tech, we invite them to join us and we take care of them, and yes, we go through that journey with them. But what your advice would be, yes, of course, like talk to AUTMHQ, but what would you also tell them, Muna?
Well, I started and I asked you to share about Autumn because networking is so important right now, especially if you're trying to transition into a role. It is so hard to find a job right now. Right now, my team is hiring, and I think one role was up for 19 hours, and we got over 1,200 applicants. And so if you're able to apply through someone where there's a personal referral, I think most of us are like, okay, you might be really smart, but if I have to sit next to you and I want to punch you in the face after 5 minutes, I'm not going to want to work with you anymore. Yeah. I want to be able to work with you and get in the trenches, and I don't mind training and sharing the knowledge of what it takes to be successful. And so that's why when someone comes through a personal referral and it's like, Mercedes is so smart, she is so talented, she doesn't give up, she produces quality work, and I think, okay, if that person doesn't have 100% of the skills, but they come with like, okay, but this is somebody's friend, and I know you, and you're kind of giving the thumbs up on this person, it will smooth over the fact that you may not have 100% of the qualifications. So that's one thing, is you gotta network and you gotta get involved with groups that can help you build the right skills. And I think Autumn helps with both of those things. But second is in networking, you have to try to learn a little bit to manage the gap, right? And so, for example, if you're into project management or you're thinking about doing project management work, but you haven't ever done specific project management roles, if you go join a networking group like meetup groups or networking groups like a PMI chapter, and you just start to volunteer with them, guess what? That's something you can put on your resume. Second, you start to meet people that are in that industry that are doing that work, and then you start to learn the lingo, and then guess what? They're all doing project manager roles, and now you've gotten yourself closer to getting a job through a referral with people that you built a relationship with.
That is so valuable because I agree with you. I started noticing that during 2020 when everyone was in lockdown. And I remember I was on TikTok as everyone else, and there were so many videos saying like, oh my God, if you do this, it's most likely you're gonna get a call to interview. And they were actually telling you like, get all the job description, make it like font size #1 and put it on your resume so that when the whatever the what?
Like the keyword search thing.
The keywords show when it gets scanned, etc. So there were so many things, yes, so many things that were, I honestly don't think that they were true, but people were so focused on making themselves visible in some way. And yes, sending out a resume to me wasn't enough back then, and it's not enough anymore. I remember my first nonprofit work was at this organization called E3 Foundation. And I remember that I knew about this organization through some billboards here in Austin. They were doing a big event, so the billboards were there. So my cover letter was telling that story that I was actually driving on, I don't know, Mopac, and I remember looking up and looking at this billboard, and I wrote the experience of how that felt to me and how I was just like, I'm just going to submit my application when I know that you guys were hiring. So they told me, Paty, we don't really know if you have the skills or not, but I love your cover letter. You stand out. So again, being yourself, being networking, and referrals sometimes are hard, but that's the reason why you need to come to these events and to be networking all the time and meeting people online. It's very, very important.
Can I add to this real quick?
Please.
I think 2 other tangible things for people who are not currently in tech but looking to pursue a career in tech. The first, you hit the nail on the head. Network. Always like try to talk to everybody, get an understand. But the first thing I would say is start by like doing research about what avenues like in tech you might be interested in. Like if there's a particular technology you want to work for or a particular type of role you want to go for, like really understanding the requirements behind what you're about to get yourself into, and then interview people who currently have those jobs to understand are you is showing up day to day going to be what you expect. So that's one tangible thing. And then another thing I would add is once you have an idea of where you want to pursue, start looking at what skills do you have today that can be transferred to that new role, and learn how to articulate yourself in a way that shows that yes, I don't have this exact requirement on this particular job description or on this one piece of the job description, but that's very similar to this time I did X, Y, and Z at my other job. And being able to articulate that helps a lot get over the barrier in terms of oh, you have this non-traditional background. So
that's correct. This is a question for Melinda. Melinda, when you and I had our first conversation, I remember you said, Paty, I think that when we are talking about diversity, that should include people with non-tech savvy or non-tech skills. And I remember I told you, oh my God, this is a really good question. Yes, diversity should include people who are not as knowledgeable in tech. And I want you to tell me a little bit of your story, because I love it when you say, Paty, can you believe I am the CEO of a tech company and that wasn't even my thing? I'm wondering if companies are overlooking this segment or this group of the population. Are we just building tech and giving for granted that people know about apps and they know how to play around, download apps or play around with them, things like that? So what do you, please, Melinda, tell us what you think and tell us a little bit of your story.
Yeah, well, like I said, I come at everything from this sort of entrepreneurial background. And really my story is I just kept trying to solve a problem. And, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I was good at building community and bringing together, and how do I do that on a bigger scale? And that's really how On the Dot was launched. I just kept trying to fix a problem, and it needed a technology solution. I sort of backed into it. I always say that I stumbled backwards and heels into tech. I didn't really mean to start a SaaS company. And in fact, when somebody said to me a few years ago, as I was describing to them, well, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm building. And they're like, oh, you're building a SaaS company. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sassy. I mean, I literally did not know that SaaS was software as a service. I had no idea. So that is from where I came. It's just completely, all of this was completely new to me. But what I think I have learned along the way is that, and I think, again, I'm generalizing, but from my experience and talking to a lot of people, a lot of this happens in these big tech companies. They look for people with they want to see that they've been at other big tech companies, and we have a way that we do things, et cetera, et cetera. I think that if you want to break into tech, doing it in the startup world, I'll give you an example. We had an intern. She was a PR major at Texas State. She was awesome. We needed people. We're teeny tiny. We needed somebody to help us test our software, and we can't go out and hire testers. We didn't have enough money to do that. So she started doing that, and she learned the back end. She is amazing at tech. This is not that difficult. And that's really what I've learned when I get into it, is that coming from a very different perspective, not only I think is super powerful, because I find things that my dev guys, I go, wait a minute, why is this here? Because I'm coming at it from a completely non-technical viewpoint, and I know that it enriches the product and what we do, and it enriches the product for our end user. We've all had technology, right, where it's so complicated and it's clunky, and it's not, and a lot of that is because you only had tech people, or only had all men, or only had a non-diverse team working on it, so you didn't have all these different perspectives. So I think that's why having different perspectives is so important, whether that be age, ethnicity, just anything, sexual orientation. Certainly, I just think that it's super critical, because the perspectives you get are so powerful. And then I think that if you want to be part of that, getting in the startup world is a great place, because a lot of times we just need warm bodies who are smart and who are willing to jump in and do the work, because you know what? You can learn anything. And I am proof, okay? I was an English literature major reading Shakespeare in college, and now I have a SaaS company. So there.
Love that. Mercedes, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, so Melinda, what you're talking about is diverse schools of thought, and I can't agree with you more. Like, that is something that I think that we all get really stuck into, just like, and I'm not saying that physical characteristics of diversity that we can see is not important, but diverse schools of thought is something that is often overlooked. And the example I was going to bring, I was recently just talking to an investor, and one of the questions I asked him was, what are you looking for in the founders of the companies that you're looking for? And to give a little bit of context, this was the HR tech space, HR tech, excuse me. And what he told me was he actually does not want a founder that has an HR background, because he feels that when a product is created by HR people for HR people, it's redundant. The same products and features, X, Y, and Z, come up. Whereas, like, if you have somebody who is from the tech space in this circumstance, it brings a different school of thought that allows the product to maybe be a little bit more diverse and accepted by a wider audience. So I think there's a lot of value to not having a traditional background in tech and going into that space, and vice versa.
I agree with you. So I'm going to go with Taisha Dotson. And we have been talking about entrepreneurship and just taking the step. We have touched on the pandemic as well. We know that it changed a lot of things and a lot of paths. Like, we just shifted to be more practical, I would say, and just to take steps and make things happen. So Ty, considering that you are right now connecting with us from Portugal, I want to ask you, do you think that remote jobs have actually made, remote work has made jobs easier for women?
I do. There are a lot of circumstances that people, particularly women, are in with our day-to-day lives that have been made better. I don't mean to rejoice in the pandemic, because obviously it's been a really difficult thing for a lot of people. But one of the things that has come of that is those of us who are working parents, as an example, who had to have our kids at home, the ability to work remotely, allowed us to, many of us anyway, to continue to keep our jobs, right? So that's one thing. But it's also, when you look at the different types of diversity, a lot of, single moms also have socioeconomic struggles. So not having to spend the money on gas, not having to try to figure out how you're going to, hop on the bus and get across town or whatever, has made a lot of jobs a lot more accessible. In addition to the fact that now I don't necessarily have to move to, San Francisco, right? Or live right in Austin to get a tech job, right? I can live somewhere more affordable because I can just do my work remotely. Or, again, I can move to Portugal, as in my case. So, I mean, I absolutely think that being able to work remote has helped a lot of people, particularly women of color, in ways that we've just never seen before.
That's great. And I would add to that, Ty, that it also has helped companies grow fast, because it's easier to hire talent from any other place around the globe without having to pay for immigration fees and things like that, or just knowing that when you have openings for just remote jobs, you're going to get a lot of response from anywhere. And that is also something that is super valuable for the company, again, because it allows you to hire better talent, I would say, and not have to just have constraints with specific area, or having to pay relocation fees, etc. So I would add.
And also, I'm sorry to jump back in, but also having folks be in many ways more invested, right? If I'm able to log in from home and I don't have to worry about getting pretty every day or whatever to get up and go in the office, that allows me to be a bit more engaged. It allows me to work more than just my 8 to 5 or whatever while I'm in the office. I mean, it also helps with that engagement.
Totally agree with you. So I am going to ask another question. I think this is a question that I want to answer myself first, and then any of you can add to it. I've never heard the term imposter syndrome. I've never heard it. When I was doing a research for a discussion like this with women in tech, I learned about it. It is so sad to hear what imposter syndrome is. And I think that I have had that all my life. And I noticed that in one of my jobs with one of my managers who was a millennial, I used to do that, but I identified that it is a cultural thing for us. We in Mexico are raised to be grateful for jobs, grateful for everything, right? And try to always, at least in my upbringing, if someone would say something nice to me, I would immediately try to pay that back. I would never be like receptive and be like, Patty, you did this job great. And right now I can just say, thank you, I appreciate that. Back then, I think because I was raised like that, I was always saying, oh my God, I did that because you helped me. And oh my God, that is so wrong. So this is something that, to me, when I learned that this is something that it exists, I'm like, I cannot believe I didn't know this. I'm happy to learn that this is something that it's supposed to be eradicated, eliminated for good. When people actually give you kudos, or they just recognize that you're doing a good job, especially if you're a Hispanic or a Latina, it's okay to say gracias. I know, or yes, I did my best, and thank you for noticing, right? So do you guys want to add anything about that? Melinda, Ty?
Well, I can speak on that because, of course, I've been in the women's space for, almost 20 years with Austin Woman magazine. And I think that the reality is I have met far fewer women who didn't have imposter syndrome than certainly I have met with. I mean, most women I know have had it at some time, and I mean, I have it all the time. I have it, you know, and I had it an hour ago, you know, and then I don't have it this hour. You know, it comes and goes all of the time, and I think that, you know, this is some of, you know, what the challenge is. You know, you talked about just even women getting into these tech jobs, and some of it is that women aren't even applying because there's a statistic out there that, you know, women, if they don't have, you know, 90+% of the qualifications, if they read a job description, they won't even apply because they'll say, oh, I've got to work a little hard, I've got to do a little more. Whereas a man, you know, if they maybe have 40%, they'll apply all day long. And so I think that there is definitely something that we overcome. But I will tell you that the number one thing, and again, I know this because I have lived it for the last 20 years, and now there's actually research that proves it, finally, that the way to overcome it is to have a strong network of other women that are supporting you, that are championing you, that are making introductions, that are sharing their networks. It is now proven, and there's research out there that shows that women are more successful. And when you see women at the top ranks, the number one thing that they had going for them is a strong posse of women championing them along. And I think that we have to understand that that is really, really critical. And I'll tell you that the only women that I have seen over the years where I think, oh, well, they don't have imposter syndrome, like, are almost scary, right? They've gone to the other extreme. And sometimes those aren't the women who are championing and supporting other women because they feel like they've had to push themselves so hard to make it on their own. Mm-hmm. So I just think that I really believe that this is like a light switch for women, that we could just turn it on in a second if we all just understood the power of coming together, the power of sharing those networks, the power of that kind word, of championing somebody, yes, of going out on a limb. It's so incredibly powerful. It's how the Old Boys Network was built all these years ago, and it's still going strong. And we have it in our power to do that and to overcome.
Melinda, you just cue me to my next question. This is something that you, Muna, mentioned to us when we were meeting for the first time, getting prepared for this conversation. You said something that I really want to highlight. You said women are more committed to uplifting each other in the workplace. And I want to ask you, how does that impact women's roles in tech, based on what Melinda was saying?
Well, I guess what I'll start by saying is that many dominant values in the corporate space and generally in the world have been traditionally masculine values, where competition is the most important thing, and looking at the short-term benefit over the long-term gain, and I win, you lose. And those things are all fine, but they're not the only value proposition that's available. And I think that when women lift each other up, and I want to be really clear, it's not to say that only women can have these feminine values, and we can, take the fact that I'm saying masculine and feminine in this binary sense just for the sake of the conversation. But when we tend to problem solve, we're looking at the long-term gain and what does it mean for us to win together. And it is a very different value proposition. I'm not interested in stepping on the person next to me and making them lose. I feel like there's enough pie and we can all win. And I actually want to share, was it Mercedes, were you telling that story about the business interaction you had? Like, I feel like this is such a good illustration of the point I'm talking about.
Yeah, so there was a circumstance that happened actually last week where my business partner and I, we recognized that there was a gap in our offering. And instead of in order to scale quickly, we decided to use like a third-party vendor to help us fill this gap. And when I was doing negotiations with the male counterpart from the third-party vendor, we were talking about like the cost to what my clients will be. And frankly, I was like, I need your product. I just want to charge my clients the cost of what it is that you need to be paid. And he's like, yeah, but like you're gonna, do a 10, 20% markup. And I'm like, no. Like, I'm just passing on your costs to my clients. And the whole reason is because I recognize like building a good relationship with this man and giving his organization business and so on and so forth was a much better long-term play in terms of relationship management and getting to know each other and like being able to do much more extensive partnerships in the long run than just like, okay, I'll take your 10%. Like, I'm not looking at pennies, man. I want a long-term like solution, and it benefits my clients in the long run too, which is what I'm here for.
I agree. Do you have anything to add?
Well, and so, it's just a different way of being and thinking about how we all win together that I find, to be honest, much more valuable for everybody. And I think that we have an opportunity to redefine what it means to win together.
Yeah. You said it's a commitment. I would say it's a responsibility. Ty, do you want to add anything to this?
Honestly, I just feel like it was so beautifully covered, honestly. But no, I definitely think that, we as women have to think about, and the metaphor that I use is building a longer table, right? Like it's like to the point, it's not a pie, right? We can build a longer table. There's enough space for everyone. But as women, understanding that like if we're going to push our careers and we're going to get ourselves sort of up that ladder, so to speak, that then to your point, Paty, it's our responsibility to turn around and not only make sure that the door stays open, but reach down and say, what can I do to support you as you're trying to climb this ladder as well, right? Like keeping that mentality of, yes, I'm fighting to break barriers and push forward, et cetera, but I'm also going to keep my hand back here so that I can bring some people along with me. And that's, the network that we were talking about, and understanding that, it's important for us to remain open to that. And then for folks that are behind us, that are trying to come up as well, understanding what questions do you need to be asking? How do you position yourself? So like earlier we were talking about people pivoting out of other industries into tech. If you're a teacher, if you're an English teacher, look at, tech writing as an example. That's a perfect transition, but do the research to understand how you can make that shift. And then as you're networking, and I don't remember who said it earlier, understand how to articulate that your skills from teaching are going to be a benefit in this role. And again, so when you see that person with their hand out, you're ready to grab their hand and go along the journey with them.
Ty, what you just said, actually, there's a mosquito here. Oh, yeah, my God. So what you just said actually ties with leadership. And by having the responsibility of helping others, I just read that. It's if you're a leader and you look at your teammates, and there's it doesn't really matter what gender they are, but if they are really needing help and there's something slowing them down with their jobs or whatever tasks they are taking, and you literally go and say, I want to help you, how can I help you, let me show you how to do it easier or effective or better or whatever, that makes you a leader. And that's it's maybe not about uplifting each other, but being uplifting, period, right? Because I wouldn't limit myself to be like, because I work with, you just said, great male allies. I have great leaders that I actually admire a lot. I work for wonderful men that have been really, really impactful in my career at this time. So I want to say that I want to be uplifting to them as well. And I think that actually creates a better environment and a better organization at the end of the day, right? So my next question is, I want to talk a little bit about culture, because one of the things that I really, really liked about this panel is how much diversity there is. And I want to talk about, this also came up in our conversation, how can we shift our learnings of asking for help without feeling judged? Who wants to go first?
Hi, Melinda. I'd be happy to give you guys a couple more, some more time.
I can answer.
Okay.
I think for me, it's about, kind of almost ignoring the fear of being judged. And I wish that I had a better, suggestion for it, but you have to emulate, I think, the thing that you want to see in the culture. So that's, in my DEI work, that's really a lot of what I do is culture shifting. And the reality is, if I'm not emulating the things that I would like to see in my organization day in and day out, it's not going to be effective. So when I'm telling people, if you make a mistake, here's how you rebound and here's the process, then when I make a mistake, I have to follow that process and I have to rebound, just as an example. So if I'm not leading the way in my actions, how do you shift a culture?
I agree with you.
I think that's a great way to say it. And I use sort of this expression about you have to deposit into your bank before you can withdraw. And so I think that my mindset has always been, how can I deposit for others? If anybody asks me anything, I'm always like, yes, I'll help you. Yes, I'll connect you. Yeah. I just have always done that. And I think that the interesting thing is that when I do need help, sometimes it's a little hard for me because I'm so I'm the one who, likes to help others. It's a little hard to ask. But what I find is that people are so amazing and so willing to do the same for me because they know I've done it for them. It's this amazing mutuality, right? And that's at the end of the day, that's really what makes our world go round, when we have this mutually, enriching and beneficial, and we're helping each other. And you can really see that, but it's about just like, you've gotta model what you're asking for, right? So you've got to give, and then it's easier when you need to ask for help, because there are people there that are just waiting to help do that.
I love those responses. Go ahead.
And just a little plug for the organization leaders that are watching this as well. I would argue that it is what we do as employees, how we show up, what our norms and behaviors in the workplace are, but also facilitating a culture for learning and for showing up and having the freedom to fail. It's only going to enhance your business. It is directly, there's a direct correlation between how employees feel the freedom to fail without being reprimanded or judged or what have you, and the amount of innovation that you see in your organization. And that is the name of the game. We want innovation, we want new ideas, new thoughts, so on and so forth. So having the freedom to fail and having a non-judgmental work environment is exactly what you should be fostering for your employees.
That's the only way to make it happen. Mm-hmm. And again, sorry to jump in.
No.
I can't see your physical cues there, but that's one of the things that I'm always preaching to organizations that I work with is employees don't shift culture. They don't. Mm-mm. That's not where it happens. It happens from the leadership down. So whatever your culture is, that is 100% on your middle managers and up, period.
I want to say that in my current role, I work very close to my CEO and my COO, and I do want to a shout out to Clifford Dukes, who is actually working with us from New York and on the back end of the live stream. I have been mentioning this to several people. I love how in this specific organization, there are some times when my CEO and my COO have a same opinion, and I am thinking different. I'm not on the same page, and we fight for our thoughts, and sometimes they win. And then other times it's Clifford and I were no, Michael, this is not how it should be. And then he's okay, then let's do it. I just love that integration. Mm-hmm. It's something new for me. I promise you, I've never felt that acceptance and just being able to more than being judged in this specific role. I feel being invited to express myself, to give my opinions, even if they're crazy and they're a no since the very beginning. They are always welcome. So you said something. This actually, all this event is going to stay on YouTube and on our platforms, and people may not see it right now, or they may not be connected right now, but they're gonna see it later. If you are run your startup or you're head of an organization, you need to make sure that people feel welcome to give their opinions and ask questions. And even if they're a big no for you, let them express themselves. It's super important.
Yeah.
Right. Good, guys. Okay, my next question, we're going to start talking about the things that I most like, which is accomplishments. So when it comes to your career, Mercedes, what is a part of your story that you consider the most valuable learning experience?
The most valuable learning experience of my career. Honestly, this is going to sound super cheesy, but the most valuable learning experience is just like learning how capable I am. I said at the very beginning of this, is like, I'm not sure how I got to where I am. And I guess that's sort of kind of untrue, but really it was like this inherent belief in myself to always push forward. I'm a pretty ambitious person, and so like, there is no top, there is no for me, you know. And but I had a lot of self-limiting beliefs. I did have an imposter syndrome when I first showed up, and like I'm a young person who owns their own business, and I'm going to sell my business to other businesses. That's extremely intimidating. But the more and more I continue to show up for myself, like the more and more I realize like I am the only thing that is preventing me from getting to where I want to be, and that has been the most valuable lesson I've learned over the course of my career.
That is a great answer. Thank you for sharing that. We are running a little bit out of time, so I want to jump directly to my next question for Melinda. Melinda, what is the biggest accomplishment you have achieved as a woman in tech?
Well, I guess just actually, launching a tech company. I think that it similar to what Mercedes was saying. It's like just knowing that I did it. I mean, look, I'm not going to lie to y'all here. Software is not what gets me all revved up and excited. I mean, that's just not, I love the magazine. I love Austin Woman and everything we do there. But the fact that I'm solving a problem with technology and have launched this company and we have customers and people who are using our platform, it's like a head scratcher for me. I'm like, wow. So it is something that in so many ways I'm the most proud of. Because I guess if you had asked me even 5 years ago, oh, do you think you could do this? I'd have been like, no way. I just wouldn't have thought that I could do it. And I know that sounds silly. I mean, I don't lack self-confidence. I'm not, I don't feel like I'm not accomplished in other ways, but it's just sort of an interesting thing to really, do something that you just thought was so far out of your comfort zone that you could never do it.
Thank you, Melinda. And Ty, same question for you. What is the biggest accomplishment you would like to share with us on your current role or previous or past roles?
My biggest accomplishment, to be honest, is finding my voice. I really quickly, when I first moved to Austin, I was a part of a team, and I don't want to say that I wasn't able to show up as my authentic self, but I noticed that me showing up as my authentic self was not being valued in the same way as other folks. And in that role, what I was able to do was find my voice to speak up and say, hey, I'm noticing some things are a little off here. Here's what I've noticed. Can we talk through this and manage up a little bit for my leadership? And that is like the single most valuable thing that I have done. It's what got me to where I am, just finding my voice and using my voice. When I stepped into my current company, I started asking questions, and it's probably really annoying, but I wanted to know, what is my organization doing? How are we working to be diverse and equitable and inclusive? And those questions are what allowed me to be selected for the role that I'm in my day job with Apex Systems as the DEI program manager. So yeah, just finding my voice was my biggest accomplishment.
I would agree with you. I love that I have been able to find my voice and love my accent. Yeah. I'm going to close with you, Muna. So to conclude our discussion, please tell me, how would you like to inspire other women who are thinking about entering the tech field, but they are afraid or feel like intimidated?
You're already enough. And I think the hardest part of starting a journey is taking the first step. And so you just got to take that step and start. And then I think that if you start as you mean to continue, things will happen because you're already brilliant. Nobody needs to give you anything else. You were smart enough to figure it out, and you're going to do it.
We cannot close this discussion with better words. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you, Muna, Hussaini, Mercedes Ballard. Melinda Garvey and Taisha Dotson. Thank you so much for being here today. And everyone who was watching and everyone here, thank you so much for being a part of ReThink Austin. And I'm going to actually ask Mr. Michael Ward Jr. to come up stage and close this discussion or take us to the next, take us to what's next, because we have something coming up. Thank you, guys.